So Tom Cotton of Arkansas might be one of the more extreme MAGA members of the U.S. Senate, but in this interview with Fox News, even he went off the deep end, calling Joe Biden a deranged ideologue. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So sometimes when I'm watching these videos on Fox News, I feel like I'm looking through the looking glass. And this is especially true with this interview from Tom Cotton, who even claims the Democrats are projecting when he's in the process of projecting. Now, I want to make it clear, I'm going to respond to a lot of his allegations here, but every single one of the allegations I make, I'm going to post the evidence for my claims down below, so you have no reason to doubt what I'm saying. And just to remember who Tom Cotton is, while he's accusing Joe Biden of being a deranged ideologue, this is the guy who wrote an op-ed for the New York Times that resulted in the editor of the New York Times having to resign for it being published. And in this editorial, Tom Cotton called for the government to unleash the U.S. military on peaceful BLM protesters. And he says that Democrats are the ones violating democratic norms. Well, let's check out this video here.
Bring in the Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton to get some reaction from this. The New York Post cover had it as a dark divide. And, before we get into the substance, could I just ask you what the visuals matter. If you remember Michael Deaver, of course, who worked for Ronald Reagan, really mastered that. I think presidential advance is one of the coolest jobs in the world. I am not sure what they were going for, but maybe the dark Brandon look was what they really wanted.
Let me just say I agree with this, and I've talked about this in other videos, that I don't think that the setting for President Biden's speech was the best. But for Republicans to claim that he has abused his position by having Marines stand behind him while he gives a presidential address is really rich after Donald Trump had military generals standing behind him at the church while he held up the Bible upside down. Remember that, folks? Let's keep watching.
Dana, I'm not sure what they were going for, either the strange and wildly inappropriate setting, the unusual, weird red lighting, most worrisome having Marines standing behind him in which he's engaging in political attacks on 74 million Americans who...
Okay, I did another video on this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is not an attack on 74 million Americans. This was specifically a speech that talked about the efforts by MAGA members to undermine American democracy, something that is a reality. And again, I'll post links, by the way, down below to recently revealed videos of Republicans training poll workers to essentially violate the law. If that's not a violation of democratic norms and an effort to try to undermine our democracy, I don't know what is. Let's keep watching.
Voted for Republicans in the last election. But then again, what would you expect Joe Biden to talk about? He can't run on his own record. Congressmen and senators can't defend the Democratic record. Think about what he didn't say last.
Okay, the Democratic record, more jobs growth than we've seen under the Trump presidency, lower unemployment, the passage of a real climate bill, lower levels of uninsured workers, and debt forgiveness that's going to target the middle class. Doesn't sound so bad to me, aside from the infrastructure bill that Donald Trump was unable to pass. Let's keep watching.
Last night. He didn't say anything about his student loan bailout from last week. And if you want to talk about dangers to democracy, that's a perfect example of it.
Now, I love how they talk about this speech, and one of their attacks on it is, he didn't talk about this other stuff. That's because that wasn't what this speech was about. This speech was specifically about democracy and how the MAGA crowd is trying to undermine democracy in America, something that is absolutely reality. And again, if you don't believe me, check out the videos I've linked to down below. But the student loan bailout, as I've described in another video, is actually a benefit that's very directly targeted to the middle class, a group that frankly has been ignored by both Democrats and certainly Republicans while they were giving their tax giveaways to the very wealthy under Donald Trump. Let's keep watching.
Joe Biden, without any legal authority, is giving away hundreds of billions of dollars to his political supporters in places like colleges and universities across America, while people who didn't go to school, who worked hard, who went to school and worked hard to pay off their loans, or whose parents had saved, they're going to bear the burden of all that debt.
No, the ones who are going to pay the burden of all this debt are people who earn more than $400,000 a year. I'm really tired of this lie constantly propping up among Republican politicians. Let's keep watching.
Joe Biden has unlawfully given to political supporters across the country. That's a real threat to democracy, just like the 87,000 IRS agents that Democrats just voted to hire last month to harass.
Okay, I'm also tired of this lie. And again, I'm going to post links to articles down below that back up everything I'm saying here. Virtually all of those new hires that are being pointed to are basically replacements for people who are retiring or for positions that have been unfilled. Republicans, including Tom Cotton, have been doing their best to try to starve the IRS so it's unable to go get the tax cheats who are the very, very wealthy in this country. That's who these people are targeted at. And what's more is, have you tried calling the IRS? It's impossible to get someone on the phone. They answer 1 out of 10 phone calls. The reason for that is, guess what? They're understaffed. So now if you call the IRS, you might actually be able to get someone to answer your call. Isn't that terrible? Let's keep watching.
Hardworking families and small businesses. Those are the real threats to democracy, not what Joe Biden was lying about last night.
Senator, you say
Okay, Joe Biden was lying about. Again, I'm going to post down below a video of where Republicans are being trained to break the law in polling locations. That's the type of behavior that Joe Biden was pointing to. And it's on video if you don't believe it, so check it out down below. Let's keep watching.
he didn't say anything about the student loan stuff. I want to just put this on the screen because it's just fascinating. Our crew put this together. It's brilliant. These are the words that Biden failed to mention last night. And remember that he in the White House kept saying this is a policy speech. It's not a political speech. Inflation, zero. Fentanyl, zero. Border, zero. Cartels, zero.
Okay, again, I love this. Basically, the spin on Fox News is, oh, he gave the speech, but he didn't talk about these other things. That's because that wasn't what the speech was about. This was a policy speech about American democracy, which was totally appropriate. If he had given a speech on infrastructure, do you think he'd be talking about the Voting Rights Act? That doesn't even make any sense. What's more is, let's just look at the things that they talk about that Joe Biden didn't mention here. Inflation. Is inflation higher than it should be right now? Yes. But has it been going down? Also yes. Fentanyl. Well, as I detailed in another video, fentanyl seizures are way up compared to how they've been in the past, higher than they've ever been. Border, again, also, arrests at the border are higher than they've ever been. So much for the border being ignored. Cartels. I don't even know what they're referring to here, actually, to tell you the truth. It just shows where Fox News lives in this news bubble of their own that they create that has no relationship to reality. Debt. Yes, because Joe Biden actually reduced people's debt. Prices, where inflation has been slowing. Gas, which has been steadily going down in price for the last 2 months. Abortion, which poll after poll has shown is actually going against the Republicans right now. And crime, which actually has been declining of late. It just doesn't seem. Why wouldn't he mention those things? Well, maybe it's because he's talking about something else. Let's keep watching.
Zero. Prices, zero. Gas, zero. Abortion, zero. Overdoses, zero. Income, zero. And mortgage, zero. This apparently was not a great policy speech.
Not a lot of policy in that speech, Trace. And again, to go back to the threats to democracy, many of the things you just cited that he didn't address, like the fentanyl crisis or 100,000 Americans dying every year from overdoses, more than 20 times we lost in the entire Iraq war, the open border, that gets back to Joe Biden abdicating his responsibility to enforce the law, to uphold immigration laws as written by Congress, and to protect our borders from a slow-motion invasion.
Again, we are arresting more people at the border than we've ever arrested. That's enforcing the law. We're seizing more fentanyl at the border than has ever been seized, by magnitudes. That's enforcing the law. And yet they say he's not enforcing the law. It just doesn't even make any sense. Let's keep watching.
Not only of migrants looking for jobs, but vicious, violent cartel members and gang members who are flooding our streets with drugs. This again gets back to the real threats to our democracy, which is Joe Biden and the far left of the Democratic Party, who will disregard the law and overturn long-standing customs and standards of democratic practice in America to pursue their radical ideology.
Okay, let's talk about disregarding long-standing precedent in America. Number one, we are not the ones training people to violate the law in polling locations. That's Republicans, as the video I posted down below shows. We are not the ones who refuse to acknowledge that the other party won the election. That's Republicans, who, despite all the evidence to the contrary, continue to insist that Donald Trump won the election, even after dozens of lawsuits have been thrown out of the courts and their attorneys have been fined for raising baseless allegations. And even when they've conducted a forensic audit, they found that there was no problem. So let's stop with the talk about how Democrats are the ones violating long-standing norms. Let's keep watching.
What we need to do is to protect the American people from the deranged partisan ideologue you saw on stage last night by making sure that we elect a Republican majority to the Congress this fall. Once we do that, I'm going to protect the American people from that deranged ideologue.
Now, here's what's really scary. I mean, this guy is basically an authoritarian, a fascist, by the way, or a near-fascist, as President Biden pointed out, quite correctly, by the way. This is a guy who believes, as he described in an article that, again, I'll link to down below, that peaceful dissent by Americans should be suppressed with violent military action. When he talks about protecting Americans, he's talking about the Americans who look like him and suppressing everybody else who doesn't. This guy is nothing short of a fascist, and I'm calling him what it is. Let's keep watching.
Can I just ask you one last question, though? There are some on Twitter from the left saying that if you're criticizing this speech, and especially the look of it with the Marines behind, but you didn't criticize President Trump for what they're saying is the same thing, are you being hypocritical? Just give you a chance to answer that.
Again, like Joe Biden, I think that's what psychologists would call projecting. The Democrats continue to attack Republicans for supposedly undermining our democracy.
He completely dodged the question there. Trump had that speech where, again, he held up the Bible upside down, where he had military generals standing behind him. And one of the generals actually later said that he felt uncomfortable with it and wished he wasn't there. That was a blatantly political speech. And yet Tom Cotton didn't say anything about that. And he immediately turns the question then to say, oh, it's the Democrats who are doing everything, undermining long-term values. Well, I'll tell you what, we are actually undermining one long-term value. And you know what long-term value that is? It's racism and the ability of our country to treat certain groups worse than others. That is definitely something that we're trying to undermine, and that is what you are trying to protect, Mr. Cotton. Let's keep watching.
But the Democrats are the one who stood idly by while left-wing street militias burned our cities in the summer of 2020 with almost no...
Nobody burns the cities in the summer of 2020. Actually, the only violent uprising that occurred was when the Republicans attacked the Capitol in Washington on January 6th. But Mr. Cotton doesn't have a problem with that. Let's keep watching.
No legal consequences. Joe Biden's Department of Justice is the one sicking the feds on parents at school boards or refusing to enforce the law.
Okay, there are so many lies here, I don't even know where to start. But basically what this is an example of is, well, I just have to put it out, it's a lie. Because basically, the basis of this claim is a speech in which Merrick Garland said that when physical threats are being made against members of school boards, that the federal government is going to investigate those threats and enforce the law against them. There never was any investigation of parents at meetings who are just raising issues at school board meetings. This is purely following up on violent threats. But the problem is, and this is where Tom Cotton really shows his true colors, is that he's okay with violent threats as long as they're coming from people on the right. He does everything to protect those people who are engaging in those violent threats, whether they be people threatening the lives of school board members or members of Congress, as we just heard yesterday, or for that matter, engaging in an attempt to overthrow the government at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Tom Cotton has no problem with those because they suit his ideology. Let's keep watching.
Side of Supreme Court justices' homes when you have left-wing agitators clearly violating federal law. The Democrats are the one that...
The left-wing agitators clearly violating federal law, you know what they're doing? They're peacefully marching up and down the street holding signs. That seems like a real violation of democratic norms. Let's keep watching.
Just voted to hire 87,000 new IRS agents. They're the ones that are threatening democratic standards and norms in our country. They're projecting this onto Republicans because they don't have any accomplishments on which they can campaign this fall.
Senator, thank you.
Senator Tom Cotton, thank you. Have a good Labor Day weekend. We appreciate you being here today.
This guy really is the ultimate example of one of the MAGA crowd. He follows the Donald Trump approach of basically spreading poop everywhere he can and trying to cause as much trouble as possible, and then stepping in and claiming that he and his crowd are the ones who can fix it. Part of the reason I wanted to play this interview was because it is so chilling to see someone who is so unapologetically authoritarian who is in a leadership position in our government. If this interview doesn't scare you and make you realize just how right Joe Biden was to call out the MAGA crowd who are trying to undermine our democracy, I don't know what will. Well, while we're talking about the fact that the MAGA crowd are so extreme, why don't you check out this video over here where I describe just how extreme the MAGA crowd is and how the mainstream media has failed to cover the full extent of their extremism. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.